She didn't call a press conference. She didn't post a tearful video. She didn't slide into anyone's comments to set the record straight. After 15 years of marriage, 3 kids, and a life built entirely in the public eye, Ashley Sparks walked into a Utah courthouse on March 10, 2026, and let the paperwork do the talking. No reason listed, no statement issued, just a filing. And for a woman who spent years posting about love, resilience, and the unglamorous reality of being married to one of reality TV's biggest personalities, that silence is louder than anything she could have said out loud. Because here's what most people missed. By the time Ashley made that move, the world around Heavy D had already been unraveling for years. Legal battles, a federal fine that hit the $850,000 mark, an arrest that made national headlines, a brand that had gone from Discovery Channel glory to genuine controversy. The question isn't why she filed. The question is, what took so long? Before Heavy D was a household name, he was just a kid from Utah who couldn't stop taking things apart. Growing up in Salt Lake City as the 4th child in a military family, Dave Sparks developed an obsession with engines before most kids his age even had a driver's license. Auto mechanics wasn't just a class he took in high school. It was the only thing that made sense to him. While his peers were figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives, Dave already knew. He skipped the traditional route. One semester at Weber State University was enough to convince him that a classroom wasn't where he was going to learn anything useful. He dropped out, went to work operating heavy equipment for his uncle's construction business, and started building something of his own on the side. That something was Diesel Sellers, a custom diesel truck operation based out of Bountiful, Utah, that he ran alongside his best friend and future business partner, David Diesel Dave Kiley. What made them different wasn't just the builds, it was the camera. The two started filming themselves working, pulling pranks, and pushing trucks to their absolute limits, then posting everything online. The videos caught fire. Millions of views led to a Tonight Show appearance with Jay Leno, and that appearance led to a phone call from Discovery Channel that changed everything. Diesel Brothers premiered on January 4, 2016, and it ran for 7 seasons before Discovery pulled the plug. At its peak, the show had a fan base that stretched well beyond the truck community. Heavy D wasn't just a mechanic on TV, he was a personality. Loud, charismatic, genuinely funny, and completely committed to the bit. The kind of guy you root for without really knowing why. And right there beside him, through every season, every build, every giveaway, every headline, was Ashley. They met the way a lot of things happen in Utah, at church. It was 2008, and Dave Sparks was still years away from television deals and national headlines. He was just a guy building trucks and trying to make something work. Ashley Bennett wasn't looking for a reality TV husband. She was looking for someone real. By every account, that's exactly what she found. They dated for 2 years before tying the knot in August 2010. No grand gesture, no spectacle, just 2 people from Utah who decided they were in it together. And for a long time, everything about their life reflected that simplicity. 3 kids followed. Daughter Charlie Mae came first, then sons Bo and Mac. The family settled in Utah, built a home, and quietly became one of the more recognizable families in the reality TV world without ever really trying to be. Ashley's presence was never showy, but it was consistent. Her Instagram account built to over 177,000 followers, not because she was chasing an audience, but because people genuinely liked watching her. She posted the honest version of family life, road trips, birthdays, the kind of candid moments that felt nothing like the polished content that was flooding every other feed. She was the counterweight to Heavy D's chaos. Where he was loud and larger than life, she was grounded and straightforward. What made them compelling as a couple wasn't drama. It was the opposite. They looked like proof that the whole thing could actually work. That you could build a business, film a TV show, raise 3 kids, and still come home to someone who genuinely had your back. Fans believed in them because Ashley made it easy to believe in them. But behind the anniversary posts and the family photos, a far more complicated story was quietly building. And the first cracks had nothing to do with their marriage at all. In August 2021, Ashley Sparks posted something on Instagram that most people scrolled past without a second thought. It was their 11th wedding anniversary, and instead of the usual highlight reel caption, she wrote something unexpectedly honest. She talked about how she used to tell Dave she loved everything about him, and how one day out of habit, she said it again, then stopped herself and took it back. Not everything, she admitted, but she was still madly in love with him. They both laughed about it. At the time, it read as charming, relatable even. The kind of raw, unfiltered moment that made her Instagram worth following in the first place. She wasn't performing a perfect marriage. She was describing a real one. She wrote about how no marriage is perfect, how every couple has quirks that drive the other one crazy, and how the only thing that gets you through the hard stretches is choosing to focus on the good. She ended it with something that stuck, that when you focus on the downs, you tend to get more downs. When you focus on the ups, you get more ups. It was the philosophy of someone who had clearly done the work, someone who had sat with the difficult parts of a long marriage and made a conscious decision to stay anyway. And in 2021, with 11 years behind them and 3 kids in the house, that choice seemed to be paying off. But read those words again now, knowing what happened 5 years later, and they land completely differently. Because what Ashley was describing wasn't just gratitude, it was effort, deliberate, ongoing effort to hold something together that didn't always hold naturally. The question nobody was asking at the time was simple. What happens when the effort stops working? What happens when the downs stop being something you push through and start being something you can't come back from? By late 2025, they were about to find out. Long before the arrest made national headlines, the legal trouble had already been grinding away at everything Heavy D had built. It started back in 2016 when a Utah advocacy group called Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment filed a civil lawsuit against the Diesel brothers, alleging they had repeatedly violated federal law by modifying trucks to produce excessive black smoke from the exhaust. The group called it some of the most toxic pollution on the road. Heavy D called it off-road customization that he believed was perfectly legal. The courts didn't see it that way. In June 2018, a federal judge issued an injunction ordering the team to stop making similar modifications immediately. Sparks maintained he had been operating in good faith and was actively working with the Environmental Protection Agency to ensure compliance going forward. But the case didn't end there. It kept building. In March 2020, the same year Diesel Brothers aired its final season, federal judge Robert J. Shelby ruled that Sparks, along with crew members Keaton Hoskins and Joshua Redbeard Stewart, had violated the Clean Air Act on hundreds of separate occasions and had also breached the 2018 injunction. The fine landed at $850,000, even accounting for mitigating factors the judge acknowledged. It was a number that would make anyone's stomach drop. They appealed. In December 2021, the appeals court upheld the verdict and went further, describing the conduct as flagrant misconduct. On top of everything already owed, Sparks and Stewart were hit with an additional $928,602 in legal fees payable to the opposing side. That's not a setback, that's a financial crater. And through all of it, the rulings, the appeals, the escalating dollar figures, the clock kept ticking on what was still owed. The case didn't resolve. It lingered. And when debts of that size linger long enough without resolution, the consequences tend to get very personal, very fast. The worst was still to come. On October 2nd, 2025, a federal arrest warrant was issued for David Sparks. 5 days later, on the morning of October 7th, federal marshals showed up and took him into custody in Salt Lake County. He was on his way to board a private jet to speak at a state event when it happened. The charge was contempt of court, specifically his failure to pay $843,602.23 that he still owed to Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment as a result of the 2021 lawsuit ruling. Years of appeals, delays, and legal maneuvering had finally run out of road. The system had lost its patience. What followed was 3 days in the maximum security wing of the Salt Lake County Jail, including time in solitary confinement. For a man who had spent the better part of a decade building a brand around freedom, big trucks, and living life on his own terms, that was about as far from his world as you could get. When he got out, he went straight to Instagram. He posted a video that was classic Heavy D in tone, defiant, passionate, and utterly convinced he was the one being wronged. He insisted the arrest had nothing to do with refusing to pay money he legitimately owed. He framed the entire legal battle as a corrupt system being weaponized by lawyers who had learned to twist environmental laws into personal profit machines. He said he was fighting back not just for himself, but for 20 other people and companies in Utah who had been put through the same thing. Whether you believed him or not, the image was hard to ignore. A man who had once been Discovery Channel's biggest personality, standing in front of a camera explaining why he had just walked out of 3 days in solitary confinement. Back home, Ashley was watching all of it unfold. 5 months later, she filed for divorce. Make of that timing what you will. On March 10, 2026, Ashley Sparks walked into a Utah courthouse and filed for divorce. No press release, no emotional Instagram caption, no carefully worded statement pushed through a publicist. Just a legal document, a signature, and 15 years of marriage officially beginning its end. The filing listed no reason for the split. Under Utah law, that's standard. The state allows for no-fault divorce, meaning neither party has to assign blame or explain themselves publicly. But the absence of an explanation doesn't mean there isn't one. It just means Ashley chose not to hand it to the world on a plate, and that choice says something in itself. This is a woman who had spent years being open about her marriage, who had posted through the anniversaries, the hard stretches, the unglamorous reality of building a life with someone who lived half of it on camera. She had never been the type to go quiet. When she had something to say, she said it. The fact that she said nothing here, that she let the paperwork speak instead, suggests the decision had already been made long before the filing. You don't go silent on something like this unless you are completely certain. What she's left behind is a set of circumstances that speak loudly enough on their own. A husband arrested by federal marshals 5 months earlier, a legal battle that had been draining resources and reputation for nearly a decade, a brand that had gone from Discovery Channel glory to federal courtrooms, 3 children watching all of it happen in real time. Nobody outside that marriage knows exactly what the final conversation looked like. Nobody knows what was said, what was asked for, or what became impossible to forgive. That part belongs to them. What the rest of the world got was a court filing dated March 10, 2026. 15 years reduced to a document with no explanation attached. Sometimes that's the only answer people get. There is a version of this story that ends differently, where the legal battles get resolved quietly, the fine gets paid, and Heavy D and Ashley Sparks become one of those couples who made it through something genuinely difficult and came out the other side still standing together. It almost looked that way more than once. But that's not the story that got written. What actually happened is this. A man built something remarkable from nothing. A truck shop in Utah that became a YouTube channel, that became a Discovery Channel show, that became a brand worth millions. He built it alongside his best friend, his crew, and a wife who showed up for every chapter of it without asking for much in return. For a while, it was the kind of life that looked genuinely enviable from the outside. Then the consequences of decisions made along the way started arriving, one after another, in the form of court orders, federal fines, legal fees, and eventually handcuffs. And the woman who had spent 15 years choosing to focus on the ups, who had publicly committed to holding the difficult parts together with both hands, quietly decided she was done. There's no villain in this story that's easy to point to. Heavy D wasn't wrong to fight a legal battle he believed was unjust. Ashley wasn't wrong to reach a point where she'd had enough. These things are rarely as simple as one person being the problem, but what this story does leave behind is a question worth sitting with. How much can one marriage absorb before it stops being a partnership and starts being a burden? How many courtrooms, how many headlines, how many mornings of waking up to the same unresolved chaos before the person who always stayed finally decides to go? Ashley Sparks answered that question on March 10, 2026, 15 years in. No statement, no explanation, just a signature and a closed door.